There we go. Lenn.
Okay, thanks, Chuck. I guess I just wanted to start off very briefly and make reference to the questions that I sent in an email a couple of weeks ago, right after our last meeting. I hope everyone got them. And I guess I wanted to start off talking about question 3, which was about most of the examples of agroforestry provided in the chapter are occurring in other countries. And it occurred to me as I was reading these articles again last night that it's not just agroforestry that relates to. It's also, we have the boreal forests, which I guess we have some boreal forests in Alaska, but for the most part, the boreal forests are north of the United States, mostly Canada and Russia. The same with the tropical forests, of course, are all south of us. Bamboo occurs, or bamboo, I'm not so sure. I'm not aware of any major bamboo crop in the United States. But the same thing with the peat forests, which are mostly in Indonesia. So I guess, for a lot of the, what this chapter discusses, these are areas where, which are outside the United States. And so again, the question was, how are we going to try to own these solutions when so much of the resource is outside of our control? And with that, I'll just turn it over and you can respond to that or not, or start with any other kind of comments that you'd like to make.
I will comment. Well, go ahead, Betsy.
Well, this is just a curiosity, and I come with like no real knowledge. So is there anything else that the US has faced in a progressive manner that is comparable to this situation? Like, is there something where in the past we could have, we had some contributions to be made in terms of progressive understandings, but could not very easily integrate it into our own country? Does that make sense? What I'm asking or saying?
You're saying that has there been a time in the past where problems in the other places other than the United States, we have adapted? I mean, we've used their idea here?
Well, either used our idea here or somehow were able to help promote it in a way that was productive and not chauvinistic or destructive.
I don't know.
Go ahead, Chuck.
Well, I'll respond briefly to that. The only thing I can think of is that the international, the climate change group is international, and we have a role in that, which is probably outsized. We've been very unprogressive in terms of how we've insisted that not be mandatory and some negative things.
Right.
We have the opportunity to do so, but and to my knowledge, I don't know that we have. And I was going to say earlier that I watched a film in British Columbia. It was about forest in the Northwest area, some of which would be in the United States, but also, kind of from Oregon up through Washington and British Columbia, where they have these old growth forests that are, and that did get mentioned somewhere in there that these forests are being logged, and they shouldn't be. And the film was about it was about people that are kind of protesting the logging, but also very insightful, and the description made me think of that boreal forest and the kind of mystical, misty environment that it is, and and they use the term how, you know, intimate the experience of being in those forests is. So, I mean, that's an example of, I think, at least touches base with the United States, but I hear the question. I don't know the answer.
Well, and I don't know, my kind of reaction, and I think this might take it in a little bit different direction, but I think I heard on the news today, the Amazon forest, we're at a tipping point right now. And then I think in terms of the work that I'm doing in Northwest Ohio, right, with the Great Black Swamp area, and you think, several, I don't know, 1,000 years ago, and let's just even say 300 years ago, even the native population couldn't live. It was such an environment that even natives couldn't live in there. That black, but what the Great Black Swamp, but with the industrial agriculture now, and so we get all upset about what's happening in the Amazon, right? But how do we, now that we've, completely deforested the entire northwest of Ohio, and we've got industrial agriculture, how do we ever go back, right? So yeah, we're all mad at Brazil and the Amazon for what they, getting rid of the heartland, but so the context of forests is really a pretty amazing topic, and how do we address it as a planet? So I don't know. I think I kind of took it in a little bit different direction, but that's the context when I think about forests.
I mean, I was thinking, just because these areas are located in general outside of our place doesn't mean we can't contribute, like they were saying on their website, like with individual purchasing of toilet papers that don't come from, taking the forest down from those areas. And so just on an individual basis, or having businesses be aware of what they can do that will not continue the destruction of those areas in terms of our actions that we can do here. Because toilet paper, I mean, when you think, almost everybody has that here, whether it be individuals or businesses. So that can have a large impact, I think, in terms of where we source that or that kind of thing. And I don't know, some of you, when we're looking at just deforestation, because in Ohio, if you look at some of the old topical geographical maps of the original kind of what was growing here, like some of the oak maple forests or that kind of thing, that's the one thing I'm doing just on an individual basis, kind of in conjunction with Doug Tellamy. And like here we have that connecting community corridor for people, pollinators, and the planets, where I was interested in supporting the native bees. So we donated the native plants or forbs that were, for people's gardens that they could put in there that have been sourced locally. And so they have that relationship with the pollinators and birds and the other insects and things that used to go along with that. And with the city now having this, trying to increase the urban tree cover, just the idea of using all of people's residential properties or business properties to kind of replant or reestablish those original growings. Like I have a pin oak here and a maple tree, and so created an edible forest garden here with those native forbs. And so you can see the increase in the native wildlife happening just with that. And then, cooling it, so not having to use as much air conditioning in the summer, because those trees are so, I think my pin oak's 175 years old and the silver maple is 100 years old. And so I rarely, if ever, have to put on my air conditioning because of the cooling factor with the tree covers through that. And when you have edible forests that kind of copy the edge of forests, you can grow a lot of food with perennial plants like the chestnuts, hazelnuts, gooseberries, raspberries, currants, that kind of thing, because I was pretty much able to support myself for that first year of COVID by only having to go grocery shopping 4 times because everything else came out of my backyard. And this is just a regular sized urban property. So we've been looking at here, just creating that connecting community corridor where people have agreed not to use their chemicals and pesticides, leave the stems and the dead seed heads of our native plants up for the birds and the wildlife habitat. And so I've tried to keep it hyper local so that we can share, garden equipment or seeds or plants or produce from our gardens within this area. And that helps eliminate some of the transportation issues with some of our folks. And when they're growing on their properties, or, that's the issue we had. So incorporating it, we had some grant funding for people to get grow bags to grow food. So I'm just saying, I think there's ways that we can do this that can, when we think about how much of the land is owned privately east of the Mississippi, it's 80% is privately owned. And so I think it's going to need to be done through the private ownership. Also that we can be participating just here or locally in Ohio too, and just continuing to expand or develop that area that can help with urban tree cover, to help with the climate change and bringing back the wildlife and natural habitat, while also providing some perennial food sources for folks in our community who are lacking some of that food thing. So I think it can hit many things. With sort of doing the same thing. I think it can address many of those issues.
I just want to kind of tag along with what you've just said, because at our school, on the playground, Green Columbus helped us install 300 trees. 50 were oak trees that are best for the caterpillars, as we know. They also gave us 4 large bags of meadow seeds, which we have dispersed to all of the households from the school. And as you mentioned at the beginning, Lynn, it is hard for young children to understand what they can do because these locations are so far away. But I think what we can do as educators and community members is to try to make it local as much as possible. Like you were just saying, the person who was just talking, and they get it. I mean, they're just looking at, what trees made it, because we know, all of those 300 trees aren't going to make it, but a lot did, maybe a third did. So, they could do something. Focusing what they can do versus what we can't do, I think is really important as educators.
What I like about this conversation is that the dichotomy between the globalization and the localization, right? And I keep struggling with that. What Donald Trump puts a tariff on China, so Brazil cuts down the Amazon to feed, because of the agro industry, for soybeans. So yeah, so on the global basis, can we, as society on a planet, this bottom-up movement, is there enough impetus from the local versus these huge, one president of the U.S. makes one decision on a tariff that in fact impacts what happens to the Amazon, because the agro industry there with Bolsonaro, you got a leader there that believes in, so this, I'm constantly fighting this dichotomy between globalization versus localization.
I'd like to say a couple more things about consumerism. You mentioned, Diane, that one of the things we can do is to consume more wisely. And if there's one thing Americans are good at, it's consuming. And of course, a couple of things that jump out from this chapter is toilet paper, which they're destroying the boreal forest to make toilet paper out of wood pellets. And then later on in the chapter, it says bamboo makes really good toilet paper, bamboo fibers. So, but I've been going to Kroger's for a long time, and I used to always buy the recycled toilet paper. They always had it, and then the pandemic came, and suddenly there wasn't any recycled toilet paper for like 2 years. And I've been bugging them ever since to get it back again. I finally was able to get some this last time I was in. So using recycled toilet paper is certainly something. If we could get enough consumers to do it, and that's the glitch, is how we're going to convince enough people to do it. The other thing that jumps out in this chapter is palm oil. And a lot of the tropical forests are being destroyed in order to support the palm oil industry. And of course, palm oil is an ingredient in a very large percentage of factory food, the processed foods that Americans are so fond of. So if we could get Americans to change their diet and go back to eating whole foods again. And Diane, you're the perfect educator for this sort of thing. We could do something about palm oil, just by lowering the demand for it. The other thing, of course, with our corn and soybeans industries, especially in Ohio and throughout the United States, really, if we would all just stop eating beef or meat generally, the demand for corn would plummet, and the economies of the whole Corn Belt would be in a lot of trouble, and we would have a real opportunity for other kinds of crops, for agroforestry, if that would be possible. Northwest Ohio has got the perfect soil and the perfect climate for agroforestry. The trouble, as you pointed out, Paul, is that the culture is all wrong for it. We were back in this would have been a long time ago, back in the 80s, we were with the Department of Natural Resources. We were going up there and trying to convince them that just to plant trees along streams to shade the streams a little bit and improve the biota in the streams. And we would just about get run out of town. They hate trees in Northwest Ohio. It shades their corn and soybeans, they just cut and of course they created all kinds of problems up there by cutting all the trees. They have erosion problems, and of course the streams, they all prefer to turn into ditches. And so we went around and around with them a lot, and I don't expect that a whole lot has changed in the 20 or 30 years since I was up there. But these kind of cultural changes, if we can get these things rolling, we could have a real impact on a lot of things.
Yeah, I'd like to add on to that, Len. I agree with you. And, Simple Living's an educational, we were founded as an educational entity. And, if you've been around Simple Living a little bit, there's been the No Straw campaign. Chuck has about a zillion of those little stickers, but, it really created the awareness. And I just think there's something, I wonder how many people know that boreal forests are being destroyed so they can wipe their butts. I mean, really, I just think maybe a little education. Bamboo toilet paper is great. Chuck and I have been using it now, and I like it better than the other. So that, and the palm oil, it's in ketchup, it's in everything. And it was kind of encouraging the one sustainable area that, the people that are doing the sustainable palm oil, and it's a good thing, but it's really hard, when you think I sometimes make soap, and palm oil is a real nice ingredient I've been trying not to use because I didn't even know if I can trust, if it says it's sustainable, maybe not, but I just think people don't know about things. So especially the toilet paper and the boreal forest, that's huge, I think maybe a campaign or just an educational thing, so people don't understand.
Yeah, I mean, I know there's all kind of ranges, because it's not common here, but when I was doing my yoga program in India, they wash, with the bidet kind of thing. And also when COVID hit, I couldn't get toilet paper, period, not even, not talking just about recycle. I couldn't get toilet paper. And so it's still using water resources. But again, when you look at, for us here, that might be not as big an issue as it would be for, say, like Arizona or something. But I have a bidet, and so I don't have to use toilet paper at all. And then, yeah, but I think the educational part is really good. And one of the ways to not even use palm oil, when you get people involved in growing their own food and, you know, you're processing your own things, you don't have to ever use that stuff because everything's coming, you know, from your garden or your yard. So you don't have to purchase processed foods, which again, come in packaging and things. And so the choices of everything that's grown in my garden, when I looked at my garbage, what I still produce, it's really from all my snacking packages, like potato chips and things. So I grow my own potatoes, or I grow corn for my, you know, snacks that way, so that you can really look at eliminating the garbage output as well. Or, you know, preventing the use of plastics, like all the raspberries and strawberries and things that I love come in those unrecyclable plastic cartons. And so again, that was part of the choices here, as well as being able to support the native bees with those cavity nests of the stems. So I think it's all just that kind of education. And for me, how do you make it for people? Well, you know, why would they want to do that? I think for me, I just been focusing on how easy and fun it can be and making all these silly jokes about stuff, but then afterwards putting in the information about why I'm doing that. And I think, you know, but it's, again, everything I'm doing is just kind of on a local small level. But then when you start to see how many people are involved doing it, it can really build up quickly.
Yeah, and Len, I'll just confirm what you said about your question, kind of about, you would kind of assume that nothing in the culture has really changed in Northwest Ohio. The head of the H2O Ohio program made a nice presentation, and he made it so clear that the $100 and some million in the governor's budget for H2 Ohio and building wetlands and the fertilizer and the algal bloom and everything, he was just outright, you know, agriculture is the #1 export for the state of Ohio, and it's all about yield. Yeah, we're going to watch the fertilizer and everything, but you know, the culture has not changed. They want every inch of that property to go towards increasing the yield. And here's the dilemma, right? We got, I think Chuck, you and I talked about this before. We got 7.5 billion people heading towards 10 billion by 2050. So Ohio is feeding the planet, but Brazil wants to feed the planet too and cut down the Amazon and do their agro and their agro farming and soy. Yeah, so when economics, I guess, drives and we've got 8 billion people to feed, how do we? Yeah, I don't know. That's our challenge, right?
Mm-hmm.
Barb, Regina, any thoughts? I haven't heard too much from you.
Hi, everyone. I am honored to be surrounded by such smarty pantses. New word. And so such well-informed people. I'm really happy to be here. I also have not done the reading, but I figured, you know, I can not do the reading and not show up, or I can not do the reading and show up and get exposed to you guys. So thank you. I'm and I'm a little overwhelmed by, like, I feel like I just popped into this WTF. What are we going to do? Like, what ideas? But the economic slant, you know, and of course I'm thinking about all the things that I'm doing and not doing while you guys are talking. I think that yeah, we got to find a way to make money on making the earth a healthier place. And once we do that, then we don't have to worry about getting people involved, because that's what everybody wants. And I haven't figured that out yet. But I think in the meantime, you know, Diane, I love what you're talking about. I'm just eating it up. Get it? Thanks. Thank you. Thank you all. I'll be here for the rest of the hour. All of us here and everyone we know in our circles who are, you know, planting more wildflower seeds, are making a difference. We are making a difference. So I just want to, I feel like it's really important in our conversations of, you know, what do we do? And it feels overwhelming. And man, since the 80s, things haven't changed in Northwestern Ohio, and, you know, even worse. And that line of thinking, we need to just remember, I need to remember for myself to like have some level of cheer in my life, right? That I am doing something. You know, I do have a plan, and I know that what I'm doing is rippling out. So that's my piece. I'm gonna read
Nice.
the book too. Thank you so much, Chuck, for bringing the book to me. I really appreciate it.
You're quite welcome.
I mean, what needs to be done to shift it from an economic priority goal as to one of just our survival, if not survival of everything else? To me, like, is there a way to shift that where that becomes the primary importance and the economics then, you know, secondary as in terms of what can be done that way? Because I think it's more until people kind of see that this is all connected or we're all a part of this, you know, and I understand economics is super important because to be able to do the yield and shifts, but that's all going to require policy changes in our food system, basically, so that, you know, the subsidies go to organic farmers, or, you know, or subsidies go to that, as opposed to, you know, continuing to support the things that are degrading our environment detrimentally, I guess. But I don't know what that is or how to do that.
I'll comment that on the demographics, I talk about the cultural creatives. There were 50 million, according to Paul Ray and his work that he did on looking at the people in the United States who have green values, who appreciate nature, who are people like us and people in our circles. And that was updated around 2016, I think, to 80 million, about 120 million in Europe, and similar patterns in Japan, Australia, in the developed world, basically. And I think that's happening as well in India and China. So I see it as it's a cultural shift from the consumer culture, which we're good at and spoiled by, to an ecological culture where these decisions would be common sense. We wouldn't do the wrong things. But I mentioned the numbers because we need to be enough of a force and recognized as such. We're marginalized now, but the corporate media is not interested in talking about these things. It's not that they don't cover it at all, but they don't do a lot. And we need to have enough numbers that we can begin to be the mainstream, be the policy makers. And just think of the quantity of dollars that are going into the farm bill that subsidizes the farmers. Huge. I don't know the numbers offhand, but it's big. Imagine if those numbers were moved in the other direction, as Diane was saying, to subsidize food forest or organic farming, that sort of thing.
Just imagine what would happen if all of those subsidies to farmers were just dropped. There would be a huge crisis in agriculture. The current industrial farming that we do today really can't exist without all those subsidies. And if they were all dropped, then the situation would change quite a bit, really overnight, and there would be a lot of opportunities. I just had a thought. There was a book that I read at the beginning of the pandemic, and I'm completely forgetting the fellow's name, but he was talking about, here's what we can do after the failure of the market economy. And it was all very interesting stuff. I mean, it's like, okay, I'm with you, I'm with you. But the problem I was having was after the failure of the market economy, are you kidding me? You know, when is that going to be? But, you know, if you look at the last year or so, you can see how fragile the market economy has been. All the supply side, there have been so many market failures in this country going on even now. And so I think maybe the market economy is a little more fragile than we're all aware of. And if we could just make certain things happen, like, say a change in the farm subsidy situation, then the corn and bean economy, would really have a problem. I was doing some thinking. I started this thinking on the chapter on agroforestry. And I have been reading about some areas out in the Western Midwest, Kansas and Oklahoma, that sit over top of the Ogallala Reservoir. And there are a lot of rural communities out there which are literally drying up. The water level, the water level down to water in the Ogallala is so far now that a lot of the small farmers simply can't afford to pump water anymore, and they're just giving it up. And so what we see is, basically the land is going back to fallow. And so what we have is an opportunity there. I don't know enough about, I don't know enough about forestry myself, but I always learned that trees require a lot of water. But reading some of this chapter, some of these agroforestry techniques were happening in places where there's not a lot of water. So, but if we had there are all these young people out in these areas, these rural areas in Kansas and Oklahoma, who want to be farmers, and there's an opportunity there for them to do some really innovative things. If they could get some trees to grow, provide some shade, start planting, in between the rows, basically just like they were talking about there. I think that's how these things are going to get started, from the bottom up. Obviously, we're not going to get any government action to get rid of agricultural subsidies anytime soon. But just where there has been a basic failure of the market economy, let's say, in agriculture, farmers can go in and do it themselves. The price of land is probably really cheap out there now, since there's no water for irrigating the crops. And so if they could find a way to grow trees and crops in conjunction with each other, or however, and again, I'm not enough of an expert to know how feasible that is, but I think there's a real opportunity for that to happen, just to spring up by itself on private initiative.
Yeah, I think there's someone in, I can't remember, Michigan. I can't remember the name right now, but they have a permaculture farm. Like I don't water my garden at all. I haven't watered my garden all year. And because of the tree cover and the natural mulch I use for leaves, with that kind of crop rotation, I have swales that just kind of, when the water comes down the little hill, it just distributes all across my garden bed. And so I haven't had to water any of my garden. And once these perennial things are established, because if most of them are native, they've adapted to our climate and area. So they're not going to need the extra watering that our annual vegetables and things need. But there's like the Ohio Ecological Food and Farm Association is doing a lot with the Farm Bill and looking at those kinds of issues. But I was trying to think, there was something else, but I think I've forgotten already. But they've been able to set up a lot of these permaculture areas and restore, like soils, like in deserts, where then, they start maintaining and gathering that water or keeping it in the soil. And so you can actually restore an area. So it's not needing to, once it's established. But the fellow up in, I don't know, Michigan or Ann Arbor, he's been able to do it at a larger scale, again, without having the extra watering or resources, and then the natural, leaf fallings for the natural fertilizer. He has his pigs, which the meat from his pigs is so well wanted because his pigs clean up his orchards for him by just eating up all the rotten apples that have fallen. So it helps him prevent disease and pests from that. And the flavor of his pigs eating the nuts, that were destroyed by insects or bugs. He's getting these disease and pest services from the pigs, and the pigs are getting this great food. And so his pigs are actually, they'll pay high price for them because of I'm not a meat eater, but I guess because of the flavor and the quality of the so-called meat, and their free range, they're exercising through the orchards. So there's ways to, set up these things that it has to be done differently, and the scale of it will be different as well. But I think it can be. They have had some successes with a lot of these things, but it's how to get the farmers the initial outlay for that transition. And that's what Ohio Ecological Food and Farm Association, or OFA, does with a lot of the farmers, and also trying to match older farmers with the new farmers, because they're aging out basically. And the new young people are not really into doing big farm. It's a lot of, work. So they're seeing how to hook up those things so that they can transfer land and that kind of thing to help these folks get started with that too.
Yeah, I actually joined this group because I am going to be a farm girl when I grow up. And I've been listening to all kinds of regenerative agriculture, information and reading up about that. And there's a company, the name is escaping right now, but they are combining the economic motivation with the crisis in our climate and what it's doing to our agriculture to create something really beautiful. And that is science-based, looking at really what supports growing on large scales. Like, I always want to join in on this stuff, and I'm such a small player. I'm not even a player yet, really. But it's really encouraging because those folks who have their failing farms in Kansas and Oklahoma do have a great opportunity. And a lot of the folks that I've been learning about through this company, through the Regenerative Agriculture podcast, have gotten to the point of failure. They're ready to sell the farm. And they make it one more year trying these new ways. And it's a lower input than, what we're seeing in, factory farming. But it's not a zero input. It's inputting different things, though. It's looking at the health of the plant and understanding that plants that require inputs that are in what we're calling normally is referred to as conventional agriculture, those inputs, those chemical inputs, the reason that stuff is required is because the plants are not metabolizing. So the plants don't metabolize fully, so they have all this nitrogen hanging out in their systems, and that is what feeds the pests. And so, you got these farms that are failing because of climate change and because of chemical agriculture. And some of those people, even really large farms in crazy dry places like New Mexico, are finding a lot of success, like yields that surpass the chemical farming yields. So there's really good work that's happening out there. It'd be nice to speed it up.
I sometimes wonder if, like you said, these disasters happen, because that's usually when the only time people will actually respond to something. COVID hit, and then all of a sudden when all the food chain supply happened, then people are like, oh my gosh, so we have so many beginning gardeners, vegetable farmer gardeners now. So maybe it's just a matter of planning how to recover from this, like, so that we have everything in place ready to roll. And I don't mean to feel, sometimes I think that's what it takes. Or like my friend in Puerto Rico, you know, when those hurricanes went through and they were cut off with everything, you know, they got things established with solar then, and their local supply chain. So if these things happen again, they're in a much better place. So who knows? Things are being pushed to the edge now. So, you know, I think maybe it will take those things to have the foresight, to have the plans in place, to be able to mobilize it in a big way with the people that are there.
It's weird that we might require another Dust Bowl before we really take serious action. And then once that happens, how do we maintain that momentum? How do we maintain that? I don't know.
Hey, Barb, listening to you talk, there's a book that I think that you would absolutely love. It's called Omnivore's Dilemma. Have you ever read that?
It's been a while. Oh my
Oh.
gosh. When did that book come out?
Oh yeah, it's been in my library for so long, and for some reason I finally picked it up to read it. And there's a farmer in Virginia by the name of Joel Salatin, and his farm's called Polyface Farm.
Yep.
And he's proud of being a grass farmer. But there's a
Yes.
role for trees too, and the way he has his combination of pigs, chickens, and cattle. It's all an ecosystem around 500 acres, and it's a pattern that, you know, there's no chemicals, it's all organic. And, you know, if any fee, all he does, I mean, what, there was somebody in New York that wanted to buy one of his steaks or something, and he said, no, I don't send it, other than I only service the local communities. I'm not gonna send my steaks anywhere other than just right, you know. So he's got a relationship with all the local restaurants, all of his, yeah. So it's a pattern that if we can replicate, you know, and get the incentive, the financial incentive for this type of farming, and gradually make that input, like in Northwest Ohio, you know, but it's harder work. And you've got to be much more thoughtful in how you do it. Yeah, so you should reread that book. I thought it was phenomenal.
Writing it down.
I should add that Simply Living owns the DVD on the Polyface farms. We showed it at the Drexel several years ago. And
Nice.
one of the things that, you know, we call our film series documentary films on local solutions. And I remember two of the people who came as the experts were the people that own Copia Farms and just outside of Johnstown. And they do permaculture. They really do, you know, very similar work. And I buy their eggs at the Bexley Natural Market. And anyway, that they're an amazing couple. And these are the innovators, like the people here that are talking about this. This is the way change happens, and we're the future leaders when it comes to sharing and networking and speeding it up, as it were, as Barb said.
Yeah, and Joel made it clear there's an absolute indispensable role for the forest, right? I mean, it's not like it's not the industrial agriculture, right? Where you got to plant every single inch, where, you know, you can't put the row of trees that Lenn mentioned. No, the trees are absolutely part of the ecosystem, and he could never do the permaculture and the organic farming without the trees as a part of that entire holistic ecosystem.
Yeah.
Okay, we have about 10 minutes left. So if you'd, if there's anything else, other subjects you'd like to discuss, now's the time. Does anybody know anything about bamboo? About as much as I do. Go ahead, Chuck.
I'm not an expert on bamboo, but I was totally engrossed in that chapter. I just felt like, man, toward the end of it, he said something like, or the book said, well, well, it's not perfect. I'm thinking, sure seems perfect to me. Now, granted, it could be, he said it's not perfect because it could take over an area, but, and become invasive in certain circumstances. But man, I was thinking bamboo and hemp. These are two investments that our communities all need to make. I know in Youngstown, they're looking at hemp as a way to revamp their economy. And we buy the bamboo toilet paper from the Bexley market, but it's locally owned by a Black-owned business, and they distribute it, and it is great. And the paper towels, you'll see it in all the major stores now, not just the one that we buy. I forget what it's called, but you'll see it in the bamboo is taking over, and so big grocery chains are carrying it now. You look around, and they not only have the 7th generation recycled toilet paper, they've also got easily recognizable the brown toilet paper. So.
I'm gonna have to start nagging Kroger about that then. I think they hate to see me coming there because I finally succeeded in getting them to give up the single-use plastic bags. I'm gonna take credit for that because I've been nagging them about it for years now.
Way to
So
go.
they're finally doing it. Although I asked when and they say, I don't know. So I guess I'll believe it when I see it. Yeah, I guess I'm going to have to research bamboo because I found that little chapter very interesting. I know it grows here because I've seen it in the news, and it was a negative story because somebody planted it and then it crept onto his neighbor's property, and his neighbor wasn't real happy about it. So yeah, it's a very invasive plant, but I know it grows here. So yeah, maybe I'll have to start planting some bamboo and see if I can get a crop, see what its sunlight needs are. My neighbors don't hate me enough already. So does anybody else have any final thoughts? Sheila?
I would agree with Chuck on the bamboo. It just blew my mind. And Chuck, wasn't that floor we put in Delaware? Wasn't that bamboo? What was that basement
was
floor?
cork,
Oh, cork. Oh,
which
never mind
also
then.
had its day in this thing.
Yeah. But the other thing I'll say real quick back to the farms, and I think a lot of people have been to Stratford Ecological Center south of Delaware. Yeah. Oh, I can't say enough about it either, Barb, because Jeff, I always get his name wrong, Dickinson, the farmer up there, he's the smartest man I know. I mean, he's amazing. I was up there recently and he took us around on a tour, and he's just so, I don't know, knowledgeable. And like Joel Salatin, I have great admiration for, but this is a local guy who's doing it too, and just has tried a lot of things, and will say the things that don't work, and will really, really rings your bells too. He's told us about the straw or hay that he'd been feeding, just how his animals, he had so much straw, but they ate so much because they're just not getting what they need out of the straw or the hay anymore. So a local resource with a lot of smarts on growing.
I used to work there, and I am a volunteer there.
So it's true. Smartest man.
It's just the bee's knees. It's the best. I'm so in love with that place.
Yes.
And part of why I am doing what I'm doing is because I worked there. I've wanted to be a farmer since I was a little girl, and for no reason, like no business. I got no business. I got no family in farming. There's no reason why I'm attracted to it. I don't know. I'm haunted by someone, I guess, thankfully. But I thought working there would kind of cure me of that. And of course, all it did was fan the flame of it. So I am building a house right now in Delaware County, and I'm going to be moving out, and I've got 4 acres of forest and 5 acres of field that have been chemically farmed for the past 30 years or so. And I'm turning it around, and I'm really excited. And Jeff is a big inspiration for me. Yeah.
And then just information wise, there is a film screening and panel discussion this Sunday, October 30th at 2:30 at the in Studio 35 on Indianola. They're holding a free presentation of Kiss the Ground. I think, I don't know if Simply Living offered that too, but I think it's Woody Harrelson is the narrator or something, and they're looking at these kinds of solutions too for food agriculture.
That's good to know. I'll make sure it's in the update Friday. And we do have also that film, and we have shown it in local theaters here. It's a great film. And they're the same people that did the most, what's the most recent? It's escaped me.
Is it the 2040?
I think it is, yeah. And we showed that in Bexley. 2040 being a great little film based on the guy, he's from Australia, and his daughter is like, he's thinking, what if we did all the things right so that my daughter could have a livable future? And it kind of makes a tour of all the good things that we're talking about. Creating the future.
Betsy, any final thoughts?
Thank you for asking me. No, as I said, I am pretty wiped out and did not get much of a chance. I read through the pages, but it's very inspiring. It's a delight to read and to think about.
Okay, thank you. How about Gina? We'll give you the last word if you want it.
I really loved the reading, but I also enjoyed hearing everyone's input. So thank you so much. I look forward to the next chapter.
Speaking of which, I guess, Chuck, I'll turn it back over to you. Do you want to ask for a volunteer for a facilitator for next week, or for next time, that is?
Thank you. The next chapter is on wilding, which certainly is related in many ways to some of the innovations that we read about in the chapter. We are trying to rotate the facilitators. I did the first one, Lenn did this one, and who wants to do the next one?
Hey, Chuck, I wonder if we could get Lee Searles to do that, since he's written. I mean, we talk about somebody that's an expert in wilding. Wouldn't that be neat? And I bet he'd volunteer.
Paul and I are in a group that Lee is part of, and he's just amazing. So, okay, we'll try that. And if he is not able to do it for whatever reason, I'll throw it back out on email to get a volunteer. Okay, and with that, I will quit recording if I can find the little thing where it does it.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Okay. Well,
Thanks for letting me crash your party. That was fun. Thanks.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you.
you can
This
come
was
anytime,
great.
Diane.
So nice to meet you all.
Yes,
Yeah.
likewise.
See you next time.
See you
All
next
righty.
time.
Everybody.
Man. Why do I not have the ability to see?